All right, welcome back to another Champ class, everybody. Today we're going to talk about how we can talk to our kids about difficult topics, sensitive topics. Those are often a challenge for parents, so we're going to talk about some tips to make that easier. Before we get too far into it, there's a disclaimer that that these are my thoughts and opinions on it, and does not necessarily reflect that of the hospitals. All right, so I think the number one mistake that I see parents making when they're talking about difficult topics is that they don't stop and think about what they're going to say before they do it. As stressed out as they are, I think they almost want to avoid thinking about it, and so they just kind of go in without much of a plan, just to almost get it over with. So some things to reflect on when you're having difficult conversations. And by the way, before I get too far into it, when I say difficult conversations or sensitive conversations, we could be talking about death, a death in the family, a death of a loved one. We could be talking about a divorce. We could be talking about coming out. We could be talking about a war happening, a pandemic happening, whatever it might be, traumatic news. So I tried to cover things broadly so that you can run this through your family's filter and the needs that your family has. There's not going to be one piece of advice that I can give that is an exact fit for everyone. So I wanted to talk about this in broader terms so that we can have some more tools and considerations as we enter these conversations. So first, reflect on what you believe about this topic. So if it's a death of a loved one, you need to consider what are your views on life after death or the purpose of life, or do you believe in heaven? Where do you believe the soul goes, or do you believe in a soul? You need to have that sorted out before you have the conversation, because those questions will come up. And if you reflect on these beforehand, you'll have a much better direction for yourself as you go into these conversations. Why do bad things happen? Do you have more of a kind of a religious view of this, that it's all part of a broader plan? Do you do you want to talk about chaos theory with your child? Is this something that you need to consider? Another just example, should people get divorced? I think for sometimes when people are getting a divorce, it's just as simple as there's a relationship ending. It didn't work out. For other families, it's, well, grandma and grandpa are really not going to like this, and it's going to cause a big division in the family. So you need to consider these topics within the context of your family, of your society, of your reality. And then once you've reflected on these, you really need to figure out what are your goals for the conversation. What do you want to talk about, and what do you not want to talk about? Those are two really important considerations. Oftentimes, what I'll see is it almost like a stream of consciousness, where parents are just saying what comes to their mind, and they start to backpedal when they mention something that might have been, oh, just maybe a little bit too developmentally potent. So we're just too much information. So just reflect on what you want to say. And then for number three, practice and rehearse what you're going to say. I think a lot of times once we've done step 1 and 2, we feel pretty good about it. We feel like, hey, I know what I'm going to talk about. Depending on I guess the situation, it's very easy to start a conversation and just forget everything that you were going to say. So it's okay to practice in front of a mirror if you're going to talk about some things that might be sensitive, especially if you're talking about things that have potential to, I guess, be a little bit emotionally significant to your child. It's good to practice so that you can be confident in how you talk, because kids are going to feed off of your energy. If they see that you're calm and confident, then they are going to be calm and confident, and they're going to be more willing to ask you questions. So it's also important to choose the right moment to have these conversations. Make sure you have enough time so that you can get your message across, time enough to answer their questions, and in some cases, time enough to calm them down, or maybe to do something together that might break the tension, whether it be go on a walk or watch a movie together or whatever it might be. And then also, I recognize that a lot of these conversations happen because a child asks a question and it's not necessarily at an appropriate time. I think we've all been there where you're at a birthday party and your child asks why the Henderson's kittens died, and you all of a sudden have to come up with an answer for that. But actually, what I want to emphasize is you actually don't have to come up with an answer in that moment. You can say like, "Oh, that's a really good question. Why don't we talk about that on the ride home?" And that gives you time to collect your thoughts. And then that will allow for a more appropriate setting to answer those questions, so that you don't have to just say something to end the conversation while not fully answering the child's questions. And then you also want to make sure that you're in the correct emotional state to answer the questions. If you're feeling a little bit angry, frustrated, if you're feeling sad, if you're still grieving, if you're still shocked by something that happened, if you're just kind of still frazzled about anything, you want to make sure that you can communicate effectively and calmly. So we also want to know what they know. A lot of times questions come up because something happened or they've heard something. And so something that will give us time to think is to ask some follow-up questions. So figuring out where the question came from. What got you thinking about this? Know what they already know. What have you heard about this? If this is a topic that you're bringing up, you can use more of that second one. If it's a question that they have, you can ask, what had you thinking about this? Because it's important to know where the question's coming from, because that can give you a lot of guidance on the information that they're seeking. Seeing what they know about it can allow you to correct any misconceptions that might be there. It'll allow you to gain access to some of their fears that might be attached to it, or worries. And so it's a good way to start. It allows you to wrap your head around what, again, harkening back to the earlier slides, what you think about it, what you believe about things, while also giving you a good foundation to start from. On this front, we also want to we want to save the lectures. A lot of times when kids ask us questions, not all of these conversations are difficult. We might have like a very strong opinion about it. Or maybe the question came from, maybe they're asking about drugs and it comes out that they have this question because they snuck out the night before and there was drugs at the party. So your knee-jerk reaction there is to maybe punish them, jump down their throat for doing something so irresponsible, but address that issue for sure, but just don't do it in that moment. Answer the questions, validate their concerns, and then address the issue after that's been fully addressed, after their questions have been fully addressed, and let them know that you appreciate them coming to you. And but because really we want to cultivate that relationship where they're comfortable with us coming to us with uncomfortable questions. And how we react to their first few questions is really going to set the tone for the likelihood, or set the likelihood for how often they'll come and approach us with these. So when they bring it forward, listen and don't judge. You can address issues later. It doesn't have to be addressed in that moment. Usually anger will win out in those moments, and rash decisions are usually made and questions go unanswered. So we want to tell the truth, but only the truth that they can handle. And I mean that from a developmental standpoint. We just have to take into consideration kids' age as one part of it, and maturity level. Because you can have a very mature 7-year-old you can have a very immature 40-year-old. But so just take developments into account for younger kids under 3. Obviously you don't really need to tell them a whole lot. They're still very much concerned about day-to-day things, and one day bleeds into the next. They don't really think too much about the future beyond maybe there's a birthday party coming up or something. But between the ages of 3 and 8, you can give very concrete information about things that might affect their day-to-day. But beyond that, you don't really need to get too much into why something happened or what that could mean in a bigger picture sense. Starting around age 9, kids start to understand kind of more abstract what's the word I'm looking for? Concepts is the word. So that's when you can really let their questions guide what information you give. If they are mature enough to ask the question, then they can handle some form of the answer. Maybe not all of it, but again, we want to do this not because we want to hide things from our kids, but just understanding that they don't have the scaffolding, they don't have the foundations to understand some of these larger principles. And they just need some time to mature before they learn about those things. If we talk about things too early, then that typically leads to anxiety. It gives kids things to worry about that they can't control, and it leads to constant worrying. I would caution parents against talking to, I'm going to use air quotes here, their mature kids. There's a lot of parents who just think their kids are so smart and so mature, which they very well could be. But that does not mean that they can handle big adult problems and big adult situations. Those things come with time and experience. And if you're going to just tell kids about them when they're not actually dealing with them, just kind of as a heads up, then that really puts them in a place to become anxious and kind of withdrawn and just not really know what to do with the information. And I think kids will often tell you that they can handle it. And when you ask, "Hey, was it okay that I told you that?" They'll say, "Of course, yes." But I would say just avoid those conversations with them, or giving too much information, I should say. So I just want to say a note about kind of politics and how we talk about things. This comes up frequently in politics, whereas parents are talking about if it was a natural disaster or a war or a pandemic, government politics comes into play. And as an adult, we will often speak in hyperbole to each other. We'll say, so and so is going to be the end of this country. I can't believe that so and so did this. I swear they're trying to launch this country into a third world war. We really need to be careful about that around kids because they will take that literally, and very bright and capable kids will misinterpret those statements. So I think we need to go into these explanations with some humility and recognize that we don't necessarily understand the big picture, and that when we're speaking in extremes, our children will think that the country's literally going to end, or that, that, I don't know, that World War III is actually going to start. And you might believe that, and you could be right. Who knows? But again, that's filed under the information of kids don't really need to know it at that level. Um, and so part of this too, and to this last point, when we're being truthful, we also need to be honest about our own feelings. And it's definitely okay to share our feelings in the context of these conversations. If you're sad, it's okay to say you're sad. If you're angry, it's okay to say you're angry. But you need to make sure that you teach them how to handle that and model to them how you're handling it. And that they know that especially in the context of anger, that, you know, it's maybe a little bit frustrating that something's happening, but end on a hopeful note, which is what we'll talk about. Um, that really at the bedrock of all of this is that our message needs to be of reassurance. So they need to know that we're going to be there for them. And a lot of these difficult conversations lead, whether it be to death, divorce, coming out to the family, whatever it might be. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of issues attached to these topics that they just don't know how to handle. So first and foremost, we need to recognize that our message should be reassuring, and it should be supportive. If it's a death, it's, you know, um, so and so has been sick, and we just learned that they died. And I know that's sad to hear, and that we're going to miss them a lot. I'm feeling very sad right now, and I miss them a whole lot. But something that is helping me right now is to look at pictures and remember all of the important things they taught me in life and all the fun memories we had. And I wonder if you want to look at some pictures with me. So you'll notice that language there was very direct, that you were honest about your feelings, but then you also threw out some coping methods that you were using, and that and maybe you could add, I know so and so felt very loved by you, and you were very important in their life, and you made their life better. So helping them to feel better about it. With divorce, it's different, where you might want to get together with the spouse and have that conversation and tell them what's going to change and what's not going to change. Um, and that if they're feeling sad or missing one of the other parents, then how they can get in contact with them. So we just want to really focus on reassurances and solutions to potential issues that they might have. So if it's a little more abstract, you might just think of some ideas or thoughts a different way of thinking about things that might have helped you. Um, and then think about, and you can do this in your planning stages with the conversation, think about what can you do in the immediate and what needs to happen in the more distant future. So usually there are some immediate concerns, like if we're just going to keep using conversations about death as an example. That initial information could be pretty jarring, that they're just finding out. So you're going to need a plan for the immediate future. Do they need time alone? Do they need to go on a walk? Do they need the distraction of a movie? Do they need a friend to come over? Do they need their favorite meal? Just plan for something in the immediate future to provide comfort. And in the more distant future, you might plan for a memory book. You might plan for travel arrangements to the funeral. Just all of those things that you can talk about when you bring up the conversation. And if they're not ready for it, it's okay to press pause on it. It's not like you have that one opportunity. And I think the last note I will make is that everybody handles this type of like bad news or difficult traumatic situations or relationship changes. They all handle them very differently. Um, in the initial stages, in the first week or two, it's okay. Like if it's a grieving situation or a major life change, it's okay for them to have pretty big reactions to this. Where we might get concerned is if these become prolonged, if these reactions become prolonged and lasting 6 months at a time. And so that's when we say, okay, I think their kind of digestion of this news is not really happening, and we might need some more prolonged help in the form of therapy or something of that nature. But I think the main takeaway is that figure out ways to be supportive, model your own coping skills, and kind of share your own thoughts or ideas that have helped you cope with similar situations. Be confident, be calm, and just let your child know that you are there for them. And if there are issues that you have to deal with outside of these sensitive topics, like in our example, sneaking out and going to a party, just put a pin in it and get to it later. Allow them to get their questions out and allow them to receive the answer, because frankly, they knew they took a risk approaching you about it. So, and then that's really it. I think when we are looking online for information about how to talk about death or talk about divorce or talk about trauma, focus on websites that end in .org. We want to be careful about the information that we consume and that we use. Usually .orgs are more consistently good than .coms. But anyway, so yeah, I think just stay calm and be confident in having these conversations. You are going to be sharing a part of yourself when you have these conversations with your children. So don't shy away from personal values and personal beliefs when you're discussing this with your child. But thank you for listening. That's all I have for you.